our April Economic Development Commission meeting. Thanks for making the time to be here. I think so. I'll call the meeting to order at 6:07 p.m. First item on the agenda is public comment, but I don't think a member of the public is here unless Beth did.
No, and I have not heard any email or received any emails from anyone about that.
Okay. So I know that, yeah, we don't have a quorum, so we can't make a motion to approve the March minutes, right?
Right. So you could just table that to the next meeting.
Yeah. For my edification, I know I missed the last meeting, so if anyone who was at the last meeting, yeah, if you had any maybe thoughts or brief highlights on key takeaways.
Yeah, I think the minutes are, I'm just reading them again, pretty much represent what we talked about. We were going to just dive into the study a little bit more pending Sean's availability. But Woodbridge Bucks turned out to be a nice program, and we talked about some new business moves or non-moves. I think we did a little bit at the end. We always talk about who's moving into town, anything new, anything closing, that kind of a thing.
All right, so topic number 4, goals and priorities for 2021.
So in the last 2 meetings, nothing's been really formalized, but the 2 things that came up that I think kind of could use some hashing out. We had talked about the interest level for a business association, and Brooks just joined us, and we had discussed holding a kind of informal virtual networking meeting to kind of gauge the interest for that going forward. And Jeremy and I were just not able to finalize the plans for that. We had talked about doing it in April, and he and I spoke briefly earlier today and have decided to aim for June to give us a little more leeway in trying to get that together. And the other thing that had been discussed was marketing, but we didn't get down to the detail of, do we want to market the town as a place to do business, or do we want to market our existing businesses, or do we want to try to do both? So that's kind of my summary of how far we've gotten with that discussion. I don't know if anybody has any thoughts on that.
I like the idea of marketing Woodbridge as a town to do business in, because I think we do support our current businesses already.
And I think maybe everyone else can already appreciate this, but also I think the survey of residents and businesses will definitely help towards that effort of maybe understanding more as a commission what potential opportunities may look like for either marketing the town or seeing like what needs exist to make Woodbridge look more attractive to businesses that do want to enter. So yeah, I think the survey is a good input for that.
Did we talk about the business survey results? I know we talked about the resident survey results, but did we dive into the business survey results? Maybe I missed that.
We haven't. I haven't gotten very many. I haven't looked in a while, but I would guess I have like 30 or 35. So it's really not representative, obviously. And I haven't had like a big news item or several smaller news items for sending out an e-newsletter, but that's certainly on the list for when I do send out an e-newsletter, is trying to get more people to take that survey.
One thing that does come to mind that I'd be interested what everyone else's thoughts are. So I do know, initially when we came together pre-COVID. And one of the things that we did discuss was kind of the mission of the Economic Development Commission. Certainly, I think part of our objective is to like enhance and diversify the economic base of the community. And obviously that means like improving either the town economy or like the quality of life. And I'm just wondering, I know that it sounds like the abatement is on the shelf currently, and I think maybe that makes sense given like the COVID induced downturn that the town is in. But I'm wondering if there's anything else on the menu, even peripherally that that we're thinking about that we're thinking about that may meet that end like of enhancing or diversifying the economic base or I'm wondering if because I also wonder to that end what data do we have available as like as a formal commission that we can actually look at that we can say, oh well, this shows maybe that over time we're trending in the right direction. So maybe even an effort to like more better curate and like develop that data. But yeah, just thoughts. I was wondering.
So a couple thoughts. So one is we don't have a lot of data. One thing I'm working on getting currently, I think every 5 or 10 years, we get vacancy rates for commercial buildings, which is just a snapshot in time. So it's not particularly useful for us. I'm trying to see if we can get that annually instead. So, still it would be a snapshot in time, but we'd at least be able to look at trends over time after a few years. And the other thing is there's an organization called CEDAS, the Connecticut Economic Development Association. And a couple years ago, they started, I'm not sure what it's called, but it's basically a best practices program. And they have a pretty comprehensive checklist that economic development commissions and town plan and zoning commissions can look at to be more business friendly. And it's basically a menu. And that's something that we could look at to see, more closely to see what we're currently doing and what we're not doing and figure out how to get some of those things done if it makes sense for us.
So you mentioned the vacancy rates, because just looking around, I can't really tell what's empty or what's available in terms of the business district. And in terms of marketing, we may need to know that.
Yeah, and Jeremy has a decent handle on that. I mean, there's not a lot of retail space to begin with, right? Those are the ones that are visible when they're empty. But, for example, at 245 Amity, there's
Space upstairs.
A lot of space upstairs, maybe a dozen offices or so, and you or I would never know what's empty up there.
Right.
But Jeremy probably knows.
Right. And there's office space at 1764 Litchfield, and there's that Abel's building is still available. Is the brewery not moving? Are they moving? I've heard multiple stories on that. But just to go back to what Betsy was saying, I attended that webinar with the Connecticut Main Street, and did anyone, Brooks or anybody attend that? They focused on Wyndham, which is a little similar to us, but different because it already had a main street intact. So having the infrastructure of a main street and revitalizing it is different from us because we don't have a main street. And even though they're a small town, they're still a college town where they had more opportunities to attract more people in a more user-friendly way with bars and restaurants and shops. So we might be a bedroom community to the colleges, but it's not where the students live. So there were definitely some takeaways from that in the marketing aspects, which I would love to dive into if we have time. But I think the two key things of one, having the main street structure, and two, having some budget allocated to hit the ground running. That's really what you need to start kicking the can down the road.
Well, and what I really took away from the Wyndham workshop was they had, decided marketing was what they wanted to do. And it was kind of both, if I remember correctly, Wyndham as a place to do business and also Wyndham as a place to come shop, eat, dine, play. But before they did that, they hired a marketing consultant and they had a multi-year plan. So they went through this huge branding thing that involved lots of meetings with the public and feedback about, color schemes and logo and kind of vibe. So it was this very long, really personalized plan that they used. And then following that, they kind of had, it might have been a 3 to 5 year plan. They had a budget allocated to, try to hit all of the things in that plan over the course of several years. And I think they're right now at the tail end of that plan. So they were able to walk us through all of the steps that they had done.
And it seemed that they had a loyal developer who took over this forgotten historic building and renovated it, and then also that historic forgotten building and renovated it. If one was housing and one was restaurant, I don't recall the outcome, but when we look at our business district down the hill, it's not that park your car once and walk around like other towns have. And then when you look at our historic district up the hill by the gazebo, where a lot of people would like to see that development, that's not going to happen. So it's hard to compare. In theory, I can see the alignments, but in reality, it's hard. It's hard to see through the trees on that one.
In my mind, it was also a little bit chicken or the egg, right? Do we want to try to have a Main Street feel before we start marketing Woodbridge as a place to come play, eat, shop? Or does that not matter as much? Physically, we may never get to that Main Street feel. Do we, hope for the best and start marketing? And so I think that's kind of a really big picture question about, what is a priority? Because in either scenario, those would require consultants and probably a significant budget, even just to get the plan in place.
Right.
Debbie did mention infrastructure, and it kind of made me think what, or if it may be, and this is me just spitballing, so this may be a silly idea, but what about, or how feasible do we think maybe creating like an onboarding deck for the Economic Development Commission? Like, how feasible would that be? And the reason I'm bringing this up is because, right, I think all members of the commission, and even, right, I think maybe sometimes we're going to have new members and older members. We're not all starting at the same maybe starting line in terms of what we know about the economics of Woodbridge and how we think about maybe promoting our business community. And certainly I think that diversity is important, but I think maybe if we could even begin to compile resources that everyone here could begin to refer to, so that we all also, have maybe some common facts that we think are really relevant, that might be helpful. So I'm not sure if that makes sense to anyone else.
No, definitely. I think that would definitely help, especially somebody coming on that's new. You know, trying to figure out what's. That's why I say what are our needs, right? If we're saying we don't have the retail space, maybe we shouldn't target retail. We should say, okay, more restaurants or more professional offices. Woodbridge, a place to hike, bike, run, eat, dine, not necessarily shop, right? Because it's just not there. And we just focus on what we have and what's available and market that.
And so, oh, sorry, Donovan, were you gonna say anything else, by the way?
No, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, and so maybe Betsy, I know that to some extent that we're doing this, and I know that the survey of residents also, I think, will begin to give us more insight into that kind of data. But I'm wondering, is that data even really feasibly available, or maybe if anyone else has thoughts on what like that effort might look like, or if
I
it's
think
even
it
a good
depends on
idea.
what, I think it depends on what kind of data you're looking for, because there may be stuff that would be nice to have that we don't have, or stuff that we do have that's not necessarily relevant.
Right.
Um,
So, and I'm spitballing, so this might be like a silly idea. So, I mean, like we're trying to develop businesses. So, maybe at a high level, the types of businesses in town, like by business type, or maybe, and some of this I know, right, I'm just spitballing, or maybe, the number of firms in town and maybe over time, how that growth has looked or how that decline has looked. Maybe a place where we can easily refer and look at the existing tax base on like a calendar year basis, maybe like employment figures in town, like, yeah, just for like in a place where all the EDC members can easily go to. Maybe like we can begin to think more about quality of life indicators or metrics, because right, our goal as the commission isn't just to promote like development of businesses, but also like, yeah, to maybe coordinate activities that ultimately result in like increasing that quality of life and resources available to Woodbridge residents. So like that could also look like, yeah, a breakdown of like the local tax base, and yeah, like more data, like, and I think we're already doing this to some extent, but even, yeah, also putting in that same place where we're holding this data, like our takeaways and our conclusions of the surveys that we're doing and that maybe we continue to do if we find that the results are useful. And yeah, just things kind of like that. That's kind of what I was thinking, spitballing.
Yeah, and I think it would be interesting to see what this 2030 task force is looking into, and how and what kind of data they're collecting, and is are our survey results being moved, because Jeremy sits on both, which is great. Is our information going to that committee, and then what can that committee share with us? Because if um, increasing the grand list is a number one priority for the town, filling empty rental office space isn't going to do that, right? Because the property owner's already paying the taxes aren't going to go up. So I think it's twofold. That you don't want empty office space. Clearly, we want a vibrant business community, but I think it's that grand list portion of new builds, how and where, is most interesting to me. I would love to see Yale or Griffin or one of these hospitals build a branch. Just like the beautiful one Griffin built in Oxford, or Hartford Healthcare built a beautiful building in Cheshire, and all these satellite buildings. It's that kind of stuff I think is most interesting, just because of the opportunities to increase the grand list and take some pressure off our homeowners.
And yeah, Debbie actually brings up a really good point, which is, yeah, now that I'm thinking about it, there is a 2030 task force. I'm not overly familiar with,
Yeah.
exactly what they're focusing on now. I'm not sure. I can't speak for anyone else, but I'm not sure anyone else on this commission, aside from Jeremy, maybe Betsy, do know what they're speaking about, which is right, fine. But I think like my point is, obviously, if we're not trying to do things that are maybe redundant to that task force. Obviously, I think as well, it may be useful to make sure, yeah, because obviously that task force was created with a specific, prerogative or goal in mind. So like making sure that, yeah, I think we're sticking to our task, and yeah, but if any input, or if any kind of opportunities exist to partner with them, that'd be useful. But yeah, more, I think maybe more importantly as well, even right, like aside from like fostering like economic development, trying to make Woodbridge a better place to live, work, raise a family, conduct a business, I think that even collecting, yeah, date, like having surveys about, for instance, like why did you choose to come to Woodbridge? Like what, or maybe exit surveys, like why have you chosen to like leave Woodbridge? Things like that. Also, like there, I think also, and obviously I know like right, work will have to go behind this. It's one thing to say, it's another thing to do it. But all that just to say that I do think that there is, for instance, like data that might be useful for us if we maybe have the desire to collect it and then kind of store it in-house for the Economic Development Commission to use and to kind of, I think, become, I think, a lot more, or maybe, yeah, more knowledgeable about, or at least on the same page about like what's going on. And that might be helpful.
Do we have the resources to collect
Mhm.
that, Betsy?
You have me.
Yay!
Betsy, how can we help?
Betsy!
Yeah, Betsy. Betsy Strong.
Yeah, and it goes also back to what Betsy was saying, it's chicken or the egg, you know.
Right.
I don't think it's as easy as if you build it, they will come. But at the same time, I don't know what goes first. Listen, we don't have a magic piggy bank to pull out money for a consultant. So what can we do within our own means and our own time? And as Betsy is stretched thin, what can she take on and use her talents? It's tough because I think what we have is we can offer something really remarkable to people. It's how do we let people know? You know, how do we let someone know that might be in Fairfield or Norwalk, that they can move their business here for a fraction of the price, which immediately can increase their profit margins. And oh, by the way, you can move here, or your employees can live here and enjoy great schools and walking and hiking and fabulous restaurants, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, in lieu of taking out full page ads, which who knows who reads the paper anymore, how do we spread the word?
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's even simpler than that in the very beginning, right? I think is the goal to market the town, right? And then if it is, what are we marketing? And maybe we have to take a step back even to the CETUS best practices, right? If we're going to market the town, I think it'd be nice to have like a really strong bulleted list. Why should you move your business to Woodbridge, right? So, you know, maybe it's even taking a step further back to say, okay, best practices are X, Y, Z, and we're doing X. After we've done Y and Z, then we should start bragging.
Start bragging.
I mean, and you could get ideas from existing businesses, right? If you speak to the person that owns the brewery and say, "Why did you move to Woodbridge?" And then you get ideas, and you go to the saloon, and why did you move? Why did you bring your business to Woodbridge? And we can build on that and market the town based on those responses.
Yeah, Betsy, that's a really good point. I know I certainly would be interested in those best practices. I'm sure everyone else would be interested in them too.
So I could put that in the packet for next month to review and discuss. Some of those things, Donovan, I've done kind of informally. I don't think that I have anything formal about that, but a lot of our businesses are here because they live in town. So then that's, you know, saying, okay, well, now we're not marketing the town as a place to do business, but it's a place to live and do business.
Did we do a SWOT analysis recently? I'm trying to remember. I feel like we
did one a few years ago. I want to say probably 2 years ago, so maybe 2019, 2018. And that's actually what 2030 is just wrapping up right now. So they've done a SWOT analysis, and before their next meeting, they're doing the next step, which is to take what they think are the 3 most important things in each category, and then try to come up with actions or goals based off of which ones seem to be the most popular among members. And so it'll be very interesting to see where that goes.
I'd be very interested in hearing their research when they're able to share it.
And a lot of it's pretty similar.
Overlap.
Yeah, a lot of it's pretty similar to what you all discussed in your SWOT analysis, right? strengths are, location, right? We're next to Yale, it's rural and beautiful. A lot of the stuff is the same, our threats are, some of like, what's the DOT doing, right? Are they paving our roads? Are they closing the tunnel? What's happening with exit 59? So a lot of that stuff is the same. I think it'll just be very interesting to see how they kind of take it to the next level and what happens from there.
So, in terms of a budget, do we have a budget to market or create an ad or something like that? Okay.
But I think
Are there-
before we start doing that, you kind of need to have all these other things done. Like, is there a slogan? Is there, do we have photos to use? Like, we don't have any of those things yet. And who would be creating the ad? Me? I mean, I could cobble something together, but I don't know that it would be worth the money you would spend on it.
Yeah. What have we done in the past? Hey,
Nothing.
Well, I wonder if it pays to even get quotes. There's Mason right up the road, and they're a premier marketing agency. And there are some great marketers who live in town and possibly work from home these days. I mean, does it pay to invite marketers to a meeting and see who wants to throw their cap in the ring? Not that we're necessarily expecting something pro bono, but at the same time, we'd love to pick their brains to see if they could set us in the right direction, and at least we can start to get our ducks in a row. Because it might take another cycle to try to cobble together a little bit from the different budgets to put it together. And especially given that it's an election year and there will be new selectmen and maybe some other committee changes across the board. I feel like we're kind of in a pause anyway until some of those changes happen. And then there's summer, right? And then you go into summer and a lot of people aren't around. So.
Because the marketing of Woodbridge isn't just the EDC, right? It's all of.
Right, and that's why I would love to see every budget, whether it's Park and Rec or EDC or the library or whoever it is, anybody that has a budget, I would love to see them kick off X amount of dollars or percent to go in a big pool, because it ultimately will be returned to all the departments. But to co-op a little bit from everybody, maybe there's a way to cobble that together. But finance just went through all its gymnastics and all that, so I don't know how that really gets done. But I think that might be possibly the more prudent way is to do that. And then even ask businesses like a business council or mini chamber of commerce to also chip in. But I think it's going to have to be a lot of small amounts, almost like a GoFundMe that Betsy did successfully for the bike trail, to put this together, or you get a grant or something like that.
Maybe, I'm not sure if this is going to be helpful, but maybe just to make some things that were implicit more explicit. So yeah, when I was thinking about discussing goals and priorities for 2021, I think maybe I came to the conversation wondering if the marketing of the town was like the highest value thing that we could do. But it does sound like that is something that we're actively thinking about. And so, given that that's the case and that's maybe the most value add thing that we can do right now, I think, yeah, it might be helpful for us to think about, before we think about actually marketing the town and finding, ad people to maybe do the ads. It might be useful to like consider, yeah, currently, like Betsy was saying, what we actually have. And that means like referring to those best practices and kind of being able to like articulate the town's like value proposition and maybe having that formally somewhere here for the EDC.
Yeah, I think if you're marketing the town as a place to do business, we want to make sure we can check as many boxes on that best practices. You know, I haven't done the actual exercise, so I don't know this, but let's say there's 20 boxes and we check 5. You know, we should get as many, in my opinion, as many of those done or close to done as possible, and then really use that to say, look, we're considered, you know, we're doing X, Y, and Z, and that's why you should come here and not go to Wallingford or Cheshire or Oxford or any of the other places that may be in the running.
Yeah.
And to be honest, some of it just happens to be, you know, depends on real estate, you know? If we don't have the space that you need, you're not gonna come here.
Right, right. I mean, we don't have the space to develop a quarry walk, right? So they had the space, the developer who created that beautiful piece of property owned the property in the first place and happened to be a quality builder. So I mean, the stars were aligned on that one, and it's a beautiful destination if you haven't been yet. Do we have the space for that? No, probably not. But I definitely think there's progress to be made.
Yeah, that's why I go back to the point where I said if we knew, if we had a deck or something like Toby referred to, if we had a deck that we could look at and say, this space is available, this is a, you know, this can, we could bring a business here, you know, the long saloon, that whole stretch, and behind there, that open stretch of land back there, is that the town, you know, is that owned by the town? Is that available for development? Is that, can that piece be marketed? That, you know, I'm just thinking of availability and how we can use that to market. You know, that you have if we could get a target audience, if we know what we have, then we could target that specific group. You know,
Right. And I think
versus
that's how the different committees are interrelated with should there or should there not be development at the country club? Should there or should there not be development in the business district? And so it's what do they say? Like no man is an island. Like we all have to work together on this.
got it, because then you can bring in the developer, and the developer say, okay, here's my idea, and then
Right.
you get
Because I know planning did have an application from the brewery. I don't know if that's being revised or they changed course, or also for condo development on also another parcel over there by Bradley Road. Again, I don't know if it's a placeholder or something that is going to go through. I don't know if Betsy has insight in any of that, but those are 2 opportunities to grow our grand list, develop business, and bring in new residents.
So the brewery did put in an application and then withdrew it. They were told or were correct, I'm not really sure which is the issue, but they the developer told them it would cost something like some astronomical amount to put in the required water system over there, and so they withdrew for that particular space. But they are still looking to expand. They want to expand in Woodbridge, but the requirements of the space would have made the project, you know, the numbers
Unprofitable,
didn't
yeah,
make sense.
yeah.
But I believe there's conversation, but nothing formal yet about putting housing across the street from where that would have been. So on the same side of the road as Coachman. But I
Right.
don't think anything's been filed for that yet. I don't know how far along that
I
is.
saw one of the meetings had mention of that because the brewery was taking or potentially taking on the other side of the street. They had some revision to their plan. But again, is it a placeholder for 5 years from now, or is it something they're looking to do over the summer? I have no idea. But it was approved in principle, I believe.
Yeah, so unfortunately, they're not going to move forward there, but there's definitely still interested in expanding and ideally they'd like to stay in Woodbridge, I understand.
Mm.
Yeah, we definitely don't want to lose them.
Yeah.
Betsy, does the town own any significant amount of property that's just been set aside and is not being used?
None in
No.
the business district.
What about outside the business district?
Oh yeah, we're a major landowner, but the majority of the land that we own is for conservation purposes and cannot be built on.
Okay, so there could never ever be a process where you could take something out of conservation if you went through this process and then potentially, I mean, because if you're saying that land is at kind of a premium because there's so little of it, but the vast majority of the land that's owned is in conservation, you're sort of like tying your hands behind your back and trying to, fight this fight. I would think that I would imagine that there might be a process where you could pull some, if it was approved, you could pull some land out of what some of the town holdings that might create opportunities for development. That, especially if it's like in a lot of places in our town, one of the problems is parking and being able to be close to Route 15, things like that. If you were to find a parcel where some of those issues, instead of being against us, might be for us because it happens to be in a good location, that might be worth taking a look at.
Yeah, unfortunately, the vast majority of the land that the town owns is not in the business district. And if it was allowed to be developed, I don't know the legalities of that, but if it was allowed to be developed, I think it would be just for housing.
I can't imagine.
All right, I guess it, if you set up a scenario where you say, assume this, 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 and this, and these four things, and of course you backed your the other argument into a corner and there's no way out of it, and so then we're back to square one again, which is there is no land available apart from some token amount of land in some not particularly well consolidated places in the business district. So even getting a hold of a meaningful amount of land to create a business might be difficult to cobble together. And so now we're really in a bind because then we don't even have the, we can't even give the businesses that might want to come here the tools to make a meaningful facility.
That's a really good point. It's a really good point. I just can't imagine land that's under conservation would ever be voted to be developed. I mean, they can't even, there's been so many years of discussion about the country club, which is not in conservation. So to have land that's in conservation to come out for development, I can't imagine what that would look like
Okay, so
in a
then
meeting.
what we're saying is we can never really have a meaningful amount of business to take some of the pain of the grand list off of homeowners, and it will never happen.
Right, we
Not
just
in a
hope,
meaningful, not the numbers just won't, you can't make the numbers work out.
right, we can only hope that whoever owns those Bradley Road parcels or those other parcels do develop them one day, whether
But that's
it's
just
not the
one,
brewery now, it's something else later, but
yeah, that's just one location. I mean, it's,
Right.
you need more than that.
right, absolutely right.
I think, yeah, and Brooks, I think that's a really good point. And I think, like, again, I think maybe there are a couple of conversations happening. I think, right, there's the conversation about how do we actually move forward on, right, like what we've been talking about, like primarily marketing the town of Woodbridge. But I think there's another point that Brooks has really highlighted, which is, like, again, the goals that we make as an EDC are very much going to be like a perimeter around them is very much going to be created by what we know as an EDC and what we know in common. If like three of however many members we have don't know that, right? Like, I think, again, like this goes back to like the data effort that we have compiled for the EDC, right? Because it doesn't make sense for us to maybe try to market the town to attract more businesses to the town if we know that the vacancy rate for the last 10 years has been 0%, right? Or maybe we don't know. So again, like that data, which I'm not necessarily sure that we all have in common right now, is going to be important to the goals that we try to create, the goals we create, and like our ability to move the needle. And so I do think like it might be something to consider.
Yeah, and some of the other things are like there's one area where there could be maybe some give is if they change the zoning rules so that you could build taller buildings and things like that. But right now, I think correct me if I'm wrong, I think the zoning rules prohibit that and severely restrict how, the height of buildings that can be built on given property. And so that you can't do it on the X axis or the Y axis, and you can't do it on the Z axis. Well, we're screwed.
Betsy, I'm wondering, so if you and Debbie and Donovan and Brooks were a team of select people, where would you go to find like this information? Like what would you refer to maybe to
Well, I think
find
the
this
first question is
information?
what information are we looking for?
Mhm. And so like just for instance, like some of the stuff that I spoke about before. So like you did speak to the vacancy rates, but yeah, maybe just some of the like data points like I mentioned before when I was spitballing.
So vacancy rates we don't have. I'm
Okay.
hoping to get that, but then we'll just have year one data, right? We won't have anything to
Okay.
compare it to. So that's, a couple years out before we can, say if there are trends or not. Um, Landowner records, if you can go on the town's GIS and see who owns what. So you could look and see who owns those 2 vacant parcels on Bradley. You could kind of zoom in and zoom out and see what's vacant and see who owns what, and see some of the challenges there. So there are a few decent sized parcels in the business district that are vacant, aside from the ones at Bradley Road. I think there's 2, really like 1.5. One could be broken out into 2, but they have major challenges. Like there's no access to the road. So you could build something there, but how do you get to it? So there's some, major challenges with some of these sites. So the GIS data, the map that shows who owns what and how big a parcel is and where the wetlands are and how do you get to the road if you can get to the road at all. That's very, very useful information.
So someone told me once that Woodbridge and the town of and the city of New Haven have about the same amount of square footage in land, acreage, and yet how many people does New Haven have? 75,000,
125,000,
125,000, and how many people in Woodbridge?
9,000.
Like 9,000. Yeah.
Okay, so let's zoom out here. I mean, we have our hands tied. There's so much tied up in land that's in conservation. And, New Haven has more than 10 times the amount of density of people per acre. I mean, it just seems ludicrous that we can't, on some level, find some way to, carve out 5 or even 10% of that acreage and reclassify it. I mean, it just seems crazy. You cannot embark on any kind of meaningful development, business development in the town if you don't have a meaningful amount of land. And here we are, 9,000 people sitting on the same amount of acreage that New Haven sits on. And they're more than 10 times more numerous.
Yeah, I mean, part of that is, the priorities of the town. Clearly, at some point, people thought it was important to buy the land for conservation purposes. But the land that's been bought by the town for conservation purposes is not in the business district. So even if legally it were allowed.
Yeah. Okay, but with I'm sure this is not a problem that is insoluble. insolvable. It's not feasibly, you can't feasibly solve. Not with the amount of will. If there's will to do it, I'm sure there's a way it can be done.
But I think that's the problem. I don't think there is a will to do it.
Okay, well then we might as well just pack up our bags and go home. I'm sorry,
Maybe-
I hate
Nah.
I understand look at this from 30,000
Nah.
I'm not trying to look at it the level of where the grass is and my face is looking at the blades of grass. I'm trying to
Yeah.
get the big picture here, and the big picture is not going to happen. That's
Well,
what you're
part of that
telling me,
goes to
unless I'm
zoning
missing
too,
something.
right?
What?
Part of that is zoning too, the business district, as you
Again,
said.
that is something that if the town management and the townspeople had a will, that could be changed.
Well, if that's something you guys agree is important, you could always make that proposal to TPZ to enlarge the area allowed for businesses, or to increase the density, or to increase the height of the allowable height for buildings.
Right. I'm sure TPZ would be really, really pleased to hear outsiders coming in saying the way they've been doing is all fucked up. I mean, I think it takes, the selectmen saying, when we say jump, you say how high.
So, quick question. And Brooks, I want to make sure that you didn't have anything else to add before I ask.
No, I don't. I'm just trying to. There's a lot I don't know about. Like, if I'd want to know about all the conservation lands, and I'm sure if you were to look at all of the conservation lands and you were to look, sort it out by most precious, grade A, best possible land. No one's ever going to touch this over my dead body. And then there's going to be a tier below that that's not quite so precious, and a tier below that that's not, and then a bottom tier that's really, it just happens to be conservation land, but it's not that great. And it's not going to, we're not talking about stuff that's going to, no one's going to want to build on something that's going to ruin someone's wells or water supply. I'm sure that what we're talking about is just trying to even like force rank or grade, the quality of the property that's held aside from, forever being pulled out of use for commercial development. And then maybe taking a look at maybe the bottom tier, which is, the least precious tier, and seeing maybe we can do something with that might be a win-win for everyone.
I think,
but, it depends on where it's located, and it depends on, the roads around it and a lot of other things. And it probably would be, a cage match fight to the death to even get that changed from conservation land to something that can be developed on.
So I think there are a few bottom lines here for me, and I think maybe bottom line number one is I think that, right, if we want every consecutive EDC commission, whoever's on it, to be informed and to be able to set goals that make sense given the data that's available, and then to actually achieve those goals, and for those goals to actually be relevant to town material. Like, we're not like, right, we also don't want to achieve things that would be great if we achieve them in Seattle, but a small part of Seattle, but aren't really great for Woodbridge, given maybe the residents here and the certain characteristics of the town that we want to preserve. But I think basically, yeah, I think on one hand, I think that means creating infrastructure, which means maybe beginning an effort to collect like some of that data. And obviously I realize, I think maybe right now, and I'm just wondering, does everyone maybe think that that's relevant? Like, if I just want to maybe take a quick vote to ask if everyone thinks that at the very baseline, that maybe creating that infrastructure internally for the EDC, is that task relevant?
For me, I think going down the road of conservation is even a longer road than some of our marketing initiatives. And I think also given that what TP&Z has in front of them now, they may be forced to or choose to make some changes to the conservation and development plan. So it might be a little bit of a wait and see with that. But I think
to be clear, okay.
Go
So
ahead.
yeah, just to be clear, I just mean, I don't even necessarily mean conservation or TPZ. I just mean like the act of beginning to think about, hey, what statistics or metrics might we as an Economic Development Commission be interested in having at our fingertips? And is that like effort of collecting that data, or at least beginning to maybe brainstorm that
Oh, yeah. The
useful?
data is always key to decision making and all that. Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
What, Donovan, what say you? Is that an aye, or what do you think? Is it relevant?
No, I think it's relevant. I think it's relevant. But it seems like we have the lofty goal, which is infrastructure change, and then the culture seems like it's more what's our immediate goals and what's available and what's at the what we can what we have now to use. Like Brooks is looking more for the bigger picture and expanding, and that would be awesome. But is that really possible? It doesn't sound like it's possible based on Betsy. Betsy probably has the most experience here versus anybody on the, she knows more than anybody else here, and it doesn't seem like that's even.
Yeah, I'm not even talking about, trying to turn this place into the next Miracle Mile on Orange, but that's not what I'm talking about. But it seems like, I don't know, it seems like we are locked into a situation where we really can't do very much at all as a town based on decisions that have been made a long time ago. And I think it would take, and we're touching the third rail of politics in Woodbridge when we talk about development, but it really, it doesn't have to be a binary, all development, Miracle Mile, everything's commercial or forest land. It really doesn't have to be that way. But unfortunately, it's easy to make a caricature of it when you're making decisions, and people are forming sides and coalitions and factions.
Brooks, I'm just wondering, what are your thoughts? Do you think it's a worthwhile priority collecting that data? I mean, I do agree with some
I
of the
think
things
it
like
would
you
be
said.
a very big job to collect all that data because it exists on different systems. It would be very time consuming. And yes, would the information be helpful? Yes. But but I think that you'd have to ask some other questions, whether or not it'd be even worthwhile even trying, because if the town is never ever really going to seriously contemplate doing development, at least on a scale to maybe even take 10 or 15 or even 25% of the grand list burden off of the taxpayer, off of the, our shoulders. If it's not even willing to do that, I'm not sure that the whole EDC thing will get anywhere.
And yeah, okay. So, I mean, I hear what you're saying, Brooks. I mean, I think that at the end of the day, our mandate is to, I think part of our mandate is just to conduct that research into business conditions and to seek to be a place where we do have, I think, at least like that data that can be used for the responsible promotion and development of business. I hear what you're saying, though.
You can't market or promote the land we have available if the town will never ever release that land for development.
Yeah, that's a good point. I do
I mean,
think, though, that, and to your point about, right, like those legacy decisions being made in the past, which have maybe locked us into certain behaviors in the present and maybe even looking forward. I think that's, a true point, I think. But I think that, right, the more data and the more infrastructure that we collect and create as an EDC, right? I think that's going to make each successive EDC more informed. And I think that, even though there might not be, right, miracle moving things that we can do or miracles that we can perform, like I think that we'll be able to see those opportunities as we become at a higher level, more aware and more like unilaterally informed about everything. But so Betsy, I'm actually wondering, would it be all right if I followed up with you and maybe like begun to share like some of those, like pick your brain and ask you like where maybe some of these statistics could be found, like after the meeting,
Yeah,
and
and
would it be
like I
possible
said,
to share that?
some of them may exist and some of them may not. Just kind of
Right,
depends
and
on what
that's
you're looking
fair.
for.
Right, that's fair. And would it be all right if, as that was like curated, shared it with the EDC broadly? Is that something that
Yeah,
everyone, and
yeah,
if
it's
everyone
all
has
public data.
ideas, cool.
It's all public.
But I do think in that case, we should also check in with the 2030 task force just to make sure what they're doing research on, because if it's similar, we could kill two birds with one stone. If they're looking for data also, it might.
So they're not looking for data yet.
Okay.
They're just finishing up this SWOT analysis. And so they are looking big picture. I don't think they're thinking like Brooks is thinking, but they are thinking in terms of, the grand list is not just businesses, right? It's also
Right.
housing. Do we need
Mhm.
more housing? Do we need different types of housing? Should the business, I'm kind of putting words in their mouth, but should there be more density in the business district? Should the business district be expanded to include other areas? So they are going to be thinking big like that. I don't know where they'll end up.
Right. And then there's the new housing study committee also, which could overlap a little bit. It's like one big Venn diagram of overlap.
Right. Exactly. And it may end up that 2030 comes up with a list of things that need to be done, and they may say, EDC, can you take this on? TPZ, can you do this? Housing, can you do that? I don't think that they're going to exist in perpetuity the way EDC is, but I think, and it's still early days, I think they'll come up with a plan, and parts of the plan will get outsourced to different groups.
It's a good idea.
I know that before we were speaking about, how to market the town, and it certainly seems like, right, we were speaking about the best practices before. And so, like in my head, and please, chime in, anyone, if you have any ideas. But in my head, it looks like, or I think maybe it might be useful to look at the best practices, decide what we have as a town, and then, right. But I think I don't know. Like one idea is potentially, right. We could potentially, I suppose, survey. See, I think maybe, right, because ideally you'd also want an impartial third party to say, yeah, Woodbridge has these things as a town. It isn't just residents in the town that, right, are saying that Woodbridge has these things. And so, well, there are like a number of ways to do that. Like, for instance, but I don't know how feasible they are. Like, for instance, right, it'd be ideal if we were able to survey every business, not every business, but quite a few businesses that have the profile of the type of businesses that would even consider moving into town. But again, and maybe to the points like Brooks brought up and others brought up, right? Well, we don't even necessarily know, right? Would there be space for these businesses to move in? You know what I mean? And so, but that's another point. But yeah, so I think maybe one thing is like, so like I'm thinking best practices, and then as a town, if there's a way that we could create a survey or something that basically allows it to be like impartially verified that like those characteristics that we've identified actually exist, because like we may see them as an EDC, but we may send out a survey and it's like, yeah, no, I'm not really here for those characteristics, and I don't think the town has that. And then so I'm just spitballing, but I'm wondering like how does everyone maybe see us moving that forward? I think it's more though than just us deciding, yeah, these adjectives describe Woodbridge. After we look at those best practices.
Well, that's kind of what Winstead went through. They paid a decent amount of money to a consultant who came in and did surveys and series of public meetings. I mean, they probably had at least a dozen public meetings just to get feedback from people. And then they came up with, you know, possible taglines and logos and had more public meetings. I mean, it was probably, I would guess it was at least a year-long process before they even had a final product, before they started coming up with ads. Would you say, I mean, Debbie, do you think that timeline is about right? It was a very intense process. It wasn't just like
Yeah, it was a long
5
process.
people coming up
It
with
was
an idea.
focus, right, focus groups with businesses, focus group with residents, focus groups with the college, right?
And subgroups too, you know, the Hispanic residents, people,
Right.
young families, like all sorts of subgroups.
Right.
So
By
that they
industry,
made
right.
sure, yeah, it
Yeah.
was very intensive. It wasn't just like Winstead's cool, you know, it was like very in-depth research.
Right. And they focused on their, was it a lighthouse or did they have the frog? They were the ones with the
Yes, it was
frog
the
or
frog.
something.
Mhm.
So they had a mascot, and it's almost like, does our town green gazebo become your logo and follow suit? But I do think, aside from budget, there are things we can replicate in our own meager way. And we've already done some of it. And I think we should be, although there's so much to
Meager.
do, we should be proud of how far we've come. And I think the residents of town who participated in our surveys or our programs appreciate the effort. And I don't think that should get lost on any of us about we're fighting the good fight. And I think that's important.
9,000 strong, Debbie. Meager hurts. Meager.
Meager budget wise.
Okay. 9,000 strong.
Not in effort, enthusiasm, and faith. Yeah.
Yeah, we need a
I'll be your cheerleader, Toby. Don't worry.
yeah, we need a way to gauge how we're doing in terms of if we could say, okay, over the last 5 years we've grown X, or we have regressed, or we have vacancies of X, and now we have X last year, this year, the year before, year after. You know, we need to figure out some way, you know, to some sort of gauge of how we're doing and where we need to focus more our efforts and less of our efforts and that type of stuff. So I lean on you, Debbie, because you're in the real estate world. You know, maybe you can give us some ideas of your thoughts on, you know, what you're thinking.
Well, I think with the young families that moved to town, and Betsy, we've seen it together through our community council that people are moving to town because of the schools or and proximity to, maybe they work downtown or in Fairfield County, or they work from home and they appreciate the opportunities to work from home. But there's an onboarding process that's missing and you see it in the Facebook groups and on our community council of, where are the doctors, where's the dog park, how do you take care of your garbage, and this, that, the other. So I think moving to Woodbridge could also be a separate effort of marketing, although we're right now in a housing boom where inventory is flying. It's not going to last long. It's very short-lived. We're happy to have it, but it's not going to last long. And for sellers who might be leaving because the taxes are high, and now that their children may not be in the school system anymore, or they are a little more budget conscious in their retirement, why are they leaving? We would love to keep them. You know, they love Woodbridge and they may not want to leave, but budget constraints or size of their home is forcing their hand a little bit more. So I think as we talk about growing the grand list, I do think housing should be a focus. And as there are more residents who move to town, I think the businesses will rally around them. You know, the coffee shops or the kids' bookstores or clothing, etc. I think they'll find their way.
So you're saying that we should probably gear our goals more towards the community, the residents, and what the residents are looking for,
I
versus
think so. I think so, because the amount of commercial property I don't think is really going to change that much. And like we said before, property owner that has empty rental space, that doesn't change the grand list. It's better for the property owner, of course, to have a tenant, but it doesn't
It
change.
actually can change the grand list. If you've got empty vacant property, that devalues your property.
Oh, okay. Are you talking about like a fully vacant property or an office building that might have 2 open spaces out of 10?
I think the vacancy rate plays into the value of your property.
Okay.
So, if you're half vacant,
Mhm.
that does not bode well for the grand list. So
Right.
you're right in that it's not a huge boon to the grand list to bring in, a 2-person insurance office. It does help maintain or increase the value of the existing commercial property.
Right. No, that's a good point. And I think it also ties back to what Brooks was saying of planning and zoning, will property come out of conservation? Personally, I don't think that would happen. And the size of buildings, I've always heard, is also relative to our fire department, and that's why we don't have things over 3 stories for safety reasons and fire truck access and other infrastructure concerns. But I think housing can increase the grand list, bring more people to town. There's a diversity of people to town, and businesses will rally around it. I don't expect us to add 3,000 residents, but we add residents, and maybe another dentist says, I want to move into town, or other kind of medical providers, sports providers, et cetera. I think we just don't have a lot of traffic for every person who puts on the survey, which we're not talking about tonight, but every person who puts on the survey, they want a Trader Joe's. Trader Joe's isn't coming here. We don't have enough feet on the ground. But there are other businesses that would consider us if we had a few more.
I was under the impression that if for every house that comes to town, that's a net negative for the budget in the end, because the things like school and other services consume more,
Then
or
they generate.
it creates a greater burden in terms of costs than
Right,
the
I think it
revenue
depends.
comes in.
Right.
It's sort of a misconception, because the number of, when you do the simple math of saying, I'm making up numbers here, $7,000 per student at Beecher, you're taking into account the school nurse, the gym teacher, the admin staff, the assistant principals. But if you bring in, say, 3 more kids to the school, you're not hiring another secretary and another nurse and another admin. So at a certain point, that's true, right? If you bring in 100 kids,
yeah.
that would, maybe you have to hire another teacher. Maybe that's the tipping point for adding another nurse. But it's, each additional kid isn't going to cost that additional $7,000 or whatever the
Children with
number
special
is.
needs cost a lot of money.
Sure, of course.
And that probably, I don't know, that may affect it too. So
It could, yeah, but it just, in general, the number that you hear, each kid cost X dollars is an extreme simplification of the math.
Yeah,
right.
there must be incremental notches along the way.
Of course.
But it also doesn't mean that over 55 housing can't grow the grand list and patronize
Well,
local
there's a problem
businesses.
there too,
So
though, because they get a tax break, right? Because when you get a certain age, you get
depending on your income, correct, depending on your income.
yeah.
So I think those are all things to explore. I think if there was one neon light shining of the right decision, all of these commissions and boards wouldn't be discussing it for so long. So I guess the right answer is hiding out somewhere.
Yeah, there's no right answer. You just have to work with what we have. I like the idea of going through the community, because we are the community. We're all here, and just filtering through our minds and see what each person would like to see. And it's interesting if you say you're growing the economic community through more housing, and with more people, then you have more businesses, and that might work. I mean, that might be a solid something solid to look forward to. I mean, but at this point, um, we just have to work with what we have, right? Changing zonings and all that stuff is probably, we'll be 80, we'll be 90 by that time that happens. So, our immediate goals, what are our immediate goals, right? So I think that's what probably we need to focus on.
Right, I
So
agree.
I know like one of our immediate goals is maybe it sounded like at least earlier in the conversation, marketing the town. And so I think we have maybe commonly agreed that looking at the best practices that Betsy mentioned earlier might be useful, but I'm wondering if anyone else has maybe like other ideas about, yeah, what we could potentially do to kind of at least here now, like maybe create, like brainstorm the steps that we foresee going through to arrive at something that a formal document or something that we think does a good job of marketing the town.
I know at our last meeting, I think Betsy talked about it earlier. She and Jeremy, we were talking about having some sort of get together with all the business owners and people in that business community, kind of networking, pick your brain, stuff, sort of data collection type of happy hour or some sort. I think it was scheduled for Monday or one of those days. So that was one idea that came up. Um, but that sounds like it's going to be more like in June, right, Betsy?
Betsy, I know that you mentioned like a huge effort that another town made. I think you said Winston, and I know you said like they had surveys and a series of public meetings and taglines and logos and focus groups and whatnot. And I mean, I think that, yeah, I'm wondering. So it does seem like they did a lot to arrive to that final point. Is it possible for us to, as an EDC, take a look at what they did and then maybe we kind of craft up kind of a way forward that we think makes sense based on what everyone's willing to do or what we think might make sense for Woodbridge?
Yeah, I can share the video of the presentation, but it was done through a professional, so they hired a marketing firm. I'm not sure what something like that would cost, but so we could look into that. You guys could watch the video if I think it's about an hour long. And kind of towards the end, they give in the beginning they're talking about all the great results they've had, but towards the end they talk a little more about the process and how intense it was.
But we have made some strides in our own way with the resident survey and the business survey and these. We had a property owners meeting, and we're going to have another business/property owners meeting. So we are going through the motions, although not with a consultant. We're chipping away at it, and I think we are learning as we go.
I also think there's a lot more pedestrian concerns that the businesses and the landowners have that would be worthwhile to revisit. Signage is a pet peeve of a lot of local businesses, and I think too, kind of before taking on something as big and complex as marketing and expensive as marketing, doing some of these more pedestrian things would really go a long way to earning some goodwill and showing the businesses, that we're listening and we're trying to make a difference in their day-to-day lives, or day-to-day business lives.
When you say pedestrian, are they referring to like foot traffic or?
Oh, I just mean like minor day-to-day stuff. People are frustrated by signage. TPZ regulates the size and the color of their sign, and they can't have signs that move, and they can't have banners, and they can only have one size sign per business, and A-frames aren't allowed, but some businesses do it and some businesses don't because they've been told not to. And it's just it's a big issue for people.
is that, could you clarify, and I should, the planning and zoning documents are a mile long. If you have a storefront with a sign on over your front door, let's say, does that prohibit you from having a sign on a pole by the road or over your business? Do you know
I'm
what I
not
mean?
sure, but I do know that the number of signs allowed is a frustration. I haven't read through all of
Yeah.
the language
Because
on it.
I've heard that, but I wasn't sure how that works. Sometimes you drive by a place and they have a sign on a pole, but then on their business itself doesn't necessarily indicate that's the business. Right,
Sorry,
we
I
want to make
joined
sure
late.
it's, oh, hi, Cleo.
Hi, sorry I joined late. I just wanted to say that I sat through the Winstead presentation. I know Betsy did. I thought maybe Debbie, I saw you on there.
Yeah,
But at the end, they said, well, first of all, they had a full economic development staff. They had at least a director and an assistant, full-time, I think. Well, I don't know if they were full-time. So they had that. Plus, they said they spent $30,000 a year on the marketing effort, which I thought was cheap considering all the focus groups and the logos and everything that they did. It was a very, very intensive effort. So I don't think we're there yet. Plus, the big difference is they had a main street. We don't have a main street. That's a really, really big difference.
I hear what everyone. Sorry. Oh, go on. It didn't sound like you were finished, Cleo.
No, so I don't think we can take that same approach.
I mean, I think maybe I would push back on that idea, right? I think there's a lot of things that we can't do. And and obviously the $30,000 cost is prohibitive. I don't think anyone is asking us to make that investment. I think, as an EDC, we're all individuals coming here and spending our time. And so I think that right there, we can look at things that have been done and maybe make them smaller based on what we have the bandwidth and the will to do. But I mean, I certainly don't think, and I don't think, like, Cleo, you're necessarily saying, that we shouldn't aim at doing something like that. But I think, yeah, maybe I just want to be clear that, like, I do think that, right, like, just because, like, I don't think anyone's asking us to not to like make a $30,000 investment. I think, though, that there are things that maybe make sense that we could consider as an EDC, but I certainly can't speak for everyone.
Yeah, we could leverage we could leverage information. We don't have to do the same thing, but just give us ideas and things that we could take and pick apart that we can use use for using our in our efforts. But they've spent the money, so we don't have to. We could just leverage the information that they have.
Yeah, I just think it might be useful to look at a town that's more comparable to ours that doesn't have a traditional main street.
Yeah, that makes sense. I don't know which town that is. I guess someone else has.
right. But you look at the towns that created theirs, like you look at Oxford or you look at Southbury, Middlebury, a lot of those towns, they've really just tried to create that center of town feel, even if it didn't have that what we may see in our head as Main Street with parallel parking and all the shops and restaurants lining both sides. They're creating it in different. They're creating it in different ways. Woodbury, Southbury, Oxford. They're all striving for that.
Yeah, we may not have a main street, but picture being able to drive down to the business district and park and just being able to just walk around and
Right.
having something like that. It's not a main street, but it's an area where you can just drive, park, go get ice cream or whatever, and grab a beer or something.
Right.
Have that type of feel.
All right. I gotta hop. I'm sorry. Good to see everyone.
Yeah, no problem. Good to see you. So maybe we should just go to the second the chairman real estate report?
Sure. So, and I'm sorry, we just missed Debbie. So, Jeremy has volunteered to be a baseball coach for his son's Little League team. And before volunteering, he was not told what the schedule would be. Now that he's volunteered, he's found out that the schedule is that he's supposed to be leading practices on Thursday evenings. So he's in a bit of a bind for the next 2 months. So he was hoping that folks would be available to meet on the second Tuesday of the month instead of the Thursday for May and June. So it's May 11 and June 8, and I'll send an email with the dates out to people. If that's not possible, then he'll try and see if he can find somebody to sub for him to be able to join us at least one of those 2 meetings. So he apologizes for not being able to join, but this was a pretty last minute schedule change that he had. The real estate report is that there are a few new businesses opening. The wine store at 245 Amity is just waiting to get their liquor license from the state. I believe they've got everything else in place that they need. So that should be opening up in the fairly near future. There's a business whose name escapes me right now. They do this very interesting blend of robotics and art. And they're going to be going into a parcel on Bradley Road by the animal shelter. And they have some pretty major clients from around the world. And they do, if I understand it correctly, they do a blend of 3D printing for sculptures and also I guess whatever the opposite is of 3D printing, like the chipping away, that traditional sculpture, but it's all done with robots. So it's very, very high end. One of the people in the business lives in New Haven, but had the business in Brooklyn, and was looking to move closer to home, and was thrilled to find the space here. So they just went to TPZ for the first time earlier this week and signed a lease, and I think they've got to go through one more TPZ meeting before they get their final approval to move in. On Lucy's, I'm sorry, go ahead.
How many employees?
It's not a lot of people. I think it's probably about a handful of people. It's a pretty small business. Very, very, very specialized. Over on Lucy Street, the M&M fuel oil building, that is going to be taken over, I believe, by a mechanic. And they've already been to TPZ. I think they also need to go through one more meeting before they get full approval and can move in. And the other parcel on Bradley Road that is on the market behind the tennis bubble, that is also, I think, under contract, and I'm not sure if I can say more than that. I'm not sure how public that is. But so there's a lot of movement going on, which is good.
Yeah, that's good. So
That's
yeah,
fantastic.
Yeah, it's a lot, especially, I think it's a lot for us in general, but it's particularly during the pandemic, it's impressive.
can we take credit for that?
Sure.
We need to get the robotics art company on the committee. Don't we have an arts group or something?
So yeah, there is a new arts guild in town. And it's not only Woodbridge residents, it's mostly Woodbridge residents. But yeah, they meet monthly, virtually, but they, eventually will be housed out of Tent Selden, formerly known as the Teen Center. And I've been working with them to try and do a couple different art events in town. So I'm very excited to try to pair them up together and see if there's any partnership possibilities there.
So these were vacant spaces for a while that just got filled?
Yeah, so the parcel where the robotics is going has been vacant for a little while. The parcel behind the tennis bubble, if you've ever been back there,
Yeah.
has been vacant for a very long time. It looks like it's been vacant for a very long time. And then M&M Fuel has been vacant maybe since the fall, so not too long.
Oh, good.
Yeah, so some nice positive changes. And then in terms of my report, there are a couple events coming up. So I think last month I mentioned to you guys about Earth Day. That'll be later this month at the town center, 9 to 11. People can bring things to recycle like mattresses. Goodwill will be there accepting items, electronic recycling. We'll be encouraging people to pick up litter off the streets. If people choose to buy a rain barrel or compost bin off the town website, you can pick it up at the event, and a few other things. Town buildings are now open to the public. So people are still, able and encouraged to take care of business online or over email or the phone, but our doors are unlocked and open now if anybody needs or wants to come in. I just recently applied for a grant from UI to pay for some concerts down in the business district at Coachman Square. So they've got a nice big lawn and they've agreed to let me hold concerts on their lawn, assuming I get the funds. And if not, then we won't do any concerts. But it would be on a Saturday early afternoon around 1 o'clock. And I consulted with the folks over at 245 Amity to try and figure out what day of the week and what time of day would be best for them in terms of people, buying lunch for maybe a picnic or shopping before or after the concerts. And
Sorry, Betsy. Quick
yeah.
question. So I just want to make sure I understood. So you recently just applied for grants to UI, and the grant money would be used to hold a concert? Just want to make
Yes.
sure I understand. Okay,
Yep.
perfect.
Yeah, so they'd be sponsoring the concert. And then lastly, as referenced earlier in the meeting, the bike crowdfunding project was successful. So as soon as I get the check from that, I will start ordering materials, and hopefully sometime before fall, we will have a bike route in the center of town.
Wow, sounds like our economy is developing.
Sort of, yeah. I mean, it'll be nice to have some of these things. Yeah.
Good to end on
So
a good
it's,
note.
yeah, I mean, it's a lot of like little things that, hopefully add up to something big.
Nice.
Yeah.
So the bike route. I guess I have to buy myself a bike.
Well, you can do that at the bike store on Selden Plaza.
That's right.
Shop local.
I'm supposed to develop the business.
So
Great job,
that's it from me.
Betsy.
Thanks.
So I don't recall seeing anything else on the agenda for today, but maybe I just want to maybe open up the floor to anyone who wants to share or make any maybe like EDC relevant comments that they weren't able to make earlier.
I think we had a good conversation today. Some great points were brought up, and things I probably need to consider in the future. And it's been a positive meeting and some good discussions and some great points.
Any thoughts, Clea or Brooks or Betsy?
I'm all talked out, sorry.
Okay, with that, motion to adjourn. Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
All right.
Or hands
Aye.
up. Aye. All right. Well, everyone, thank you so much for your time today. And yeah, thanks for sticking it out. Also, thank you to Debbie. I know she had to leave, but if she's going to eventually watch this, thank you to her. And so have a great rest of your day.
And thank
Thank
you,
you.
Toby, for stepping in a pinch.
Sure.
Thanks very much.
Good night,
See ya.
everybody.